People working in forensics, what was the most shocking thing discovered in your lab? Years ago when I was working as a DNA analyst, our lab received a limp Caesar salad from a local restaurant. Takeout box and all. Apparently, the guy who ordered the salad said that it was served with blood in it. The restaurant owner said not possible and that the customer must have bled in it so that he wouldn't have to pay. The customer then decided to promptly bring his salad to our lab along with his DNA sample to prove that it wasn't his. Turns out that it was, and he unknowingly bled into his salad somehow. Oh. There was also that one time a dad sent in a bunch of his daughter's soiled feminine hygiene products into the lab to test for. Most shocking thing though was the time a bunch of DNA samples came. To make a long story short, one large vehicle, lots of drugs, two strung-out couples, one condom being passed back and forth, and two pregnant couples uncertain about the paternity of each baby. Candle in an old mont's bladder. I was working in a lab for a while. Nothing too exciting until we found that one of our coworkers got fired for having drugs, a gun, and other such things in their office. I know it isn't quite what the thread wanted, but that was by far the most shocking discovery. My friend's ma used to work in forensics and we got told a bunch of stories. The most memorable being of when they found the dead body of a girl hacked into bits inside a bin bag. They at first thought some sicko had murdered her and cut her up. Why no, like sickos do. But after further investigation they discovered something in her lady parts along with a giant hole. Some sciencing later and the something was an acrylic nail. Turns out she and her girlfriend were doing it when her GF's nail snapped and ripped her open from the inside and she bled out. The girlfriend, in a moment of panic, chopped her up and tried to dispose of the body. My two coworkers banging in the storage room. Not a forensics worker, but you may be interested to learn that bear is one of the most common things found in bodies of people who lay dead in forest areas. The bloody tissues left lying around. Never working in forensics ever again. Not forensics. But so many companies store your password in an idiotic manner. The most common flaw is that they know you're meant to hash passwords but use MD5, which has been known to be stupidly easy to crack for well over a decade. Seeing some of this in the wild finally motivated me to use a password manager and randomly generated passwords for each individual login. The reason you should never reuse passwords between sites is that if one company hashes them using a weak algorithm or, God forbid, stores them in plain text and a hacker gets it, they can use it on other sites. Site as you do for your bank or your social media. Well, you can guess what happens next. A hash function takes some input and spits out a mathematically related output in a way that's very difficult to reverse, i.e. it's easy to go from password to hash but going hash to password takes insane computational power. This is a useful property for passwords as it means that even if someone steals your database, then they don't steal your user's passwords. When the user inputs their password, you hash it, and if the hashes match, you let them in. Otherwise you throw an error. The gold standard today is the Argon 2 algorithm. But BCRYPT and script are common too. Only a fool uses MD5 or SHA for password hashing. In doing my MSc in forensic pathology and anthropology, there is a final practical exam component. The examiner hauled in a large cardboard box. The type, size you would store documents in. When dumped on the table, it looked like a broken plant pot. Inches diameter. He then goes, "Could you find all the pieces of example of bone and reconstruct it, please?" Turns out it was a approximately 16-year-old girl whose boyfriend had caved her head in with a stone and cut her into tiny bits before burying her in a field. Only reason she was found was because her decomposing flesh caused the plants right here her body to be oddly large and lush for a dry forgotten field. I was working in the lab late one night. Well, one thing led to another and we did the mash, we did the monster mash. I've read too and decided to quit before my eyes get tainted. That he was the father. I am a bookkeeper, billing guy at a clinic, and we tested a baby to see if he was the father. Mom and dad were both blonde hair. Wife had blue eyes. Both looked super white. Kid was really black. Was tested earlier and he didn't have a condition. He was just black. The dad wanted a paternity test cause when you have two white parents and a black kid. Raises some questions. Turns out the mom had a black grandfather that didn't show up in their skin and that she didn't know about. Kid was biologically theirs, but just looked totally different. When I found out the DNA I was studying came from the dinosaur's drive. Wu made. He was always shocked at the fact that he didn't know which DNA would create which dinosaur. Confusing times. The outlet. I coached a debater who made a fantastic argument about implicit social cognition as a reason to not pursue justice. Seminal fluid all over the place from the big blonde, our old mad scientist boss. Entfernt. Gelscht. A new discovery. Pornhub. First story. Funny. Second story. Sad. Third story. Funny and sad. Jesus Christ. I was working as a scanning electron microscope technician for the R&D branch of a private company when the head scientist gave me an unknown sample to cut up and investigate. There were a bunch of layers of paint on it and he wanted to know what elements were present. Most of the layers showed up as normal elements O, Al, Cr, etc. But one layer had a peak at PR, praseodymium, which is so rare that I forgot that it was even an element. I thought I was going crazy, but my engineer double-checked it and it was definitely there. Turns out that praseodymium is used in certain military-grade paints. You can reuse condoms. You just have to turn them inside out. For a moment there I thought your Caesar salad story was going to make reference to the shocking seized salad reddit.com. Trending over on shitty food porn right now. Phew. Wait, hold up. What did the paternity test say? First, disgustingly fun, he caused blood. Second, ... I had to close my eyes and breathe very hard for a moment. What? Just. What? Third, ... Don't do drugs, kids. Please. Just don't. You might want to call CPS on that, dad. What happened with paternity? Greater than we tested a baby to see if he was the father. Totally misunderstood what you meant by this at first and was very confused. I can't even imagine the father's reaction. Guy. You cheated on me. Woman. No honey, calm down. I swear I haven't slept with anyone else. Guy. Oh yeah? Let's go take a DNA test then, you lying. Later on at the laboratory. Doctor. Sir. You are the father. Guy. Oh. Sorry babe. This was a plot twist in 90 Day Fiancé. Everyone assumed she was full of and the dad is a black friend of hers. I am still leaning that way. But the possibility it's true is intriguing. She too claimed it was the black grandfather despite looking white AF. My great-great-grandmother was a very light-skinned black woman. Possibly mixed. She kept it to herself and said she was an orphan with no family. I don't think my great-grandfather knew. She told my grandmother, her granddaughter, when she was very old, what her background was and why she hid it. My grandmother told us, as kids, stories about her grandmother. It's funny because no one ancestor looks like they are at all black. But if you look at random people, you will see certain features come through. I tan easily and have a slightly wider nose than my sisters. They are blonde-haired and blue-eyed. I have blonde hair but hazel eyes. My one uncle had curly, dark hair but very pale skin and chocolate brown eyes. It's funny how that works out, and at this point I doubt any children we have would be very dark-skinned or anything. My great-great-grandma was beautiful. My grandma looked a lot like her. And I feel terrible that she had to hide who she was in life. I am curious to know my family from that branch, so I did one of those DNA testing kits. So, not forensics entirely. And not me. I had a professor in college that was pursuing her doctorate while working at the Mayo Clinic. Year after year, a man came in to be tested for a disease that killed his father at that very hospital. Year after year, he tested negative. But every year, he got tested in an effort to stay ahead of it. Because genetics. One year, he tested negative as usual. But the staff had an idea. They cracked open the archives, dug his father's file out and put it next to his. DNA wasn't even close. Poor guy has no idea his late father was never his biological father at all. And the hospital has no right or obligation to inform him. Frank Gallagher. My wife and I are both pretty white. But she has very black relatives and ancestors. We had to have the talk before our first baby was born. About possible color due to genetics. Sounds like to me Daddy likely didn't realize he had some African in him too. It would make it far more likely if both parents passed a little something on from ancestors who tanned really well. You met Frank and Monica. My so asked me to write. You mean Darth Vader? Luke was the son? Wow. Imagine them explaining that to friends and relatives. The Empire Strikes Black. Was his last name Gallagher? I'd probably start wondering if I'd been raped while unconscious or something in that case. As awful as it was for him, imagine how much worse it was for her. IIRC. There are a number of black Italians who are the result of relationships in North Africa somewhere during the war. The parents look like your average white Italian. But the kid comes out dark. Had the honor of discussing with a soldier in charge of forensics for military examinations, and he told us this story. Death at a refuge camp. Woman. Apparently dead in her sleep. The persons in charge of cleaning her body noticed in her genital areas and gave the alarm. Due to the lack of personnel, the soldier had to help a coroner determine the cause of death. Heart failure. No signs of violence. At least 7 different male bioprints in her. They got very confused, and could tell something was off. But not much more due to the language barrier. They then had the idea of calling a fake soldier and real translator on site to figure out what her family and countrymen were saying away from the identified translator's ears. Turns out her father was a pimp, and he was prostituting her and her siblings for money under threats. There was a full network on camp he operated, and he had an absurd amount of cash hidden on him when he was arrested. He is now in jail in his country of origin, and his family have been offered protection by our government. But I dunno much else beyond that. Edit. Forgot to mention. The death was of natural causes. She had a birth defect on her heart. However, might have, for lack of a better word, worn it too early. She was in her early 20s. And her sisters were in the same age range. That opening line sounds like something from No Sleep. Octoroon. Holy. That's bizarre. How is this related to forensics? Did something happen to the kid? This happened near me years ago, Cannock, UK. I reckon it happens every so often. I wonder if the parents ever thought the hospital mixed up the babies and gave them someone else's? Genetics are crazy. One of my friends has a black dad and a white mom, and my friend came out with the palest skin. Blonde hair and bluest eyes I've ever seen. But she got her dad's curly hair. Plot twist. It was not a written test. Reminds me of me, myself and Irene. Hey you ever notice how your sons have a year-round tan? Yeah, my great-grandmother is half Italian. Half Italian, eh? That must explain why the water beats off their hair. Did he have their hair texture? My friend's wife works in one. Getting blood samples from babies that tested positive for coke and meth was apparently fairly common. But the most recent shocking discovery was that the building's plumbing was done in such a way that chemical disposal could backflow into the water fountain drain. And management didn't really care. That's the plot of Shameless. N. The plot twist was not foreseen. The question was for forensics people. Not for bookkeepers, billing guys. Instead of automatically assuming she cheated. Did it ever occur to them that baby could have been switched in the nursery? Most black babies come out of the womb with very little melanin in their skin. So it's not like he would have noticed right away. Either she did cheat on him prior to finding out she was pregnant and wasn't 100% sure herself. Or they're both dumb. There's holes in this story. I don't know anything about that element. But do you know what the reason was for its usage in military-grade paints? Is it more resistant in some way? Huntington's? Plus. Doctors. We have two things to say. One good and one bad. Which first? / man. Sorry. Plus. Good or bad? / good. I suppose. Plus. The good one. You don't have Thar disorder that killed your father. / hooray. What's the bad one? Plus. He wasn't your father. / F% and number 4 insert bad words. Edit. Grammar. Greater than and the hospital has no right or obligation to inform him. Actually they do in his case. Greater than poor guy has no idea his late father was never his biological father at all. And the hospital has no right or obligation to inform him. Just out of curiosity. What are the consequences if the hospital does anyway? The father is deceased so he can't sue. And it saves the son some worries about carrying the disorder, of course. He will likely be upset about the news. But from a legal standpoint, what would be the consequences? I'm not a forensic. I'm just a chemist at a lab. We were investigating a case of a serial killer that raped the victims before murdering them. We discovered traces of pepper in the victim's body. I mean, he could have gotten a pepper condom in any shop, but he just decided to put real pepper on the victim's genitals. Humans are without limits. The murder weapon in my trainee's bottom left desk drawer. Not super shocking compared to others, but the first time you see a computer covered in blood full of bullet holes, it is moment you do not forget.